Today, we have a list of two-sided journal entries for 2025. We're going to use Excel to organize these into a trial balance and then into financial statements. You can find this spreadsheet at one of the links in the description. And now, without further ado, let's get into it. So we have these journal entries for the year 2025, and they consist of dates, account types, and debit and credit columns. What we first need to do is figure out what our debit and credit entries are. Now, we could go through and look for each individual account and take note of it. However, this would take a long time and could lead to errors. What we can instead do is utilize the unique function. This formula looks at the selected array and returns every single unique value in it. This is perfect for identifying our accounts here. We simply type in the formula equals unique and then highlight all of our accounts. Now that we have our accounts identified, we need to sort them into debit and credit accounts. We do this so we can easily find the sum of all of our debit and credits. Covering this is beyond the scope of this video. However, a working knowledge of the dealer acronym will help out. Now that we have all of our debit and credit accounts separated, we need to take the sum of each one of these. In order to do this, we will use the SUMIF function. I have made a few videos on how to use SUMIF, so check the description to find those. The SUMIF function takes the sum of all items that fit a certain criteria. Let's go to our first account in the debit section and type in the formula equals SUMIF, and then for our range, we're going to highlight all of our accounts in the journal entry section, taking careful care to lock in these references by pressing Fn plus F4. This allows the formula to be dragged down without any errors. Next, we have our criteria, which is our rent expense, and doesn't need any references. Finally, we have our sum range, which is going to be our debit column, and we again need to be sure to lock it using Fn plus F4. Let's go ahead and drag this formula down for the rest of our debit accounts. Next, we're going to look at the credit entries for our debit accounts. To do this, we do the exact same function as before. However, instead of our sum range being the debit column, we use the credit column. Once we have done this, we need to find the ending balance for each of these accounts. To do this, we just subtract the credits from the debits for each account, and that is our ending debit balance, which is what we want. We're also going to want to include a total row here at the bottom, and can do this by using the formula equals sum, and then highlighting all of our numbers in each column. We can also change these numbers into the currency format by going to the number format section in the Home tab. We now need to perform the same process for the credit accounts. Now that we have the totals for our debit and credit accounts, we again need to calculate the ending balances. To do this, we instead subtract our debits from our credits, which gives us our final credit balances. We're also going to want to know the totals for our credits as well, and we can just copy and paste these total sections from our debits over to here. Now for formatting the trial balance, the typical format is to include all the debit entries at the top, followed by the credit entries. We can just take the cell references for all of our accounts and put them on the leftmost column. We then do the same for the account balances and put the sum of debit accounts in the middle column and credits in the right. In order to show the difference amongst the accounts at the bottom, we take the sum of these columns independently by using the sum function, and the difference should be 0. We now have our trial balance completed, and we are ready to build our financial statements. To start off, we want to first create the income statement, as this will flow to the balance sheet. Let's begin by opening a new tab and calling it Income Statement. Our income items include various revenue and expense accounts. We can see our revenue items consist of sales revenue, and our expense items include rent expense, utilities expense, advertising expense, and cost of goods sold. We want to put these in a single-step income statement format, which is revenues minus expenses equals net income. I'm going to go ahead and create a heading for our revenues, and then in the cell diagonal to it, I'm going to list off our revenue items. I do this by typing an equal sign and then going to our trial balance and selecting the account. I'm also going to create a heading for total revenues. This will simply be the sum of our revenues, and we can calculate this by doing the sum function and highlighting our revenue balance, which we will link shortly. Now that we have our revenue, I'm going to do the exact same process for our expenses. The final heading will be for our net income. The formula for this is our total revenues minus our total expenses. This represents the amount of money the company retains and will flow to the balance sheet in the form of retained earnings. Now, to link the dollar amounts for each of these accounts, we can do one of two methods. We can either go through each account one by one and reference the balance from the trial balance, or there's another way, which is using XLOOKUP. If you're not familiar with XLOOKUP, I have a few videos explaining how it is used, which I will link in the description. For the income statement, let's start off with our sales revenue. Let's check the formula equals XLOOKUP, and for the lookup value, we're going to select sales revenue. For the lookup array, we're going to highlight all of our credit entries, and we want to lock this reference in by pressing Fn plus F4, as we're going to drag it down. For the return array, we will select the corresponding credit amounts and lock the reference the same way. We know we are supposed to only focus on the credit columns, as revenue is a credit account. We can go ahead and do the same process for our expense items, however, this time only focusing on the debit accounts, as expenses are debit accounts. We are now done with the income statement. You can format this in any way you want and can even print it by pressing Ctrl plus P. Let's move on to the balance sheet. The balance sheet equation is assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. Knowing this, our first header is going to be assets. I'm then going to find all our asset accounts in the trial balance and link them to here. I'm now going to sum up our assets under the header total assets and use the same function as earlier. For the liabilities, I'm going to do the exact same process as for the assets. Finally, we have our equity, which will be a bit different from the other two accounts. We have our normal equity account, such as our capital and owner's draw. However, we are also going to have another account, which is our retained earnings. This flows from our income statement in the form of net income, so it is important to include this in the equity section. For the account balances, we're going to use XLOOKUP the same way as we did for the income statement, this time focusing on our debit accounts. Finally, we do the same for our two equity accounts, focusing again on credits. Next, we're going to do the same for our liabilities, which will be credit balances. Finally, we can copy the formula from the liabilities into the equity section. We still have our blank account balance here for retained earnings. If we sum up our liabilities and equity, it is not equal to our assets, which confirms that we did something wrong. To fix this, let's reference the net income from the income statement. So we hit equals and then go and select net income. Once we do this, we can see that our assets balance out with our liabilities and equity, meaning we are now finished. As with the income statement, go ahead and format the balance sheet however you want. All that matters is that the information is complete and accurate. You can even put it into printable format such as I have here, and can print it by pressing Ctrl plus P. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you'd like to download the Excel file I used today, go ahead and click the link in the description so you can practice on your own. Also, feel free to check out the link in the bio to find a link for all of our spreadsheets, ranging from personal expense trackers to net worth trackers. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.